I think for our class, we found that it was mostly identifying the details that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Yeah.
Did you find the same?
Same.
Yeah.
I mean, I had like 1 or 2 outliers that couldn't distinguish what was different in the choice that we gave them, but majority of my 2s were all not being able to identify 2 similar details.
Yeah.
We can agree that's the barrier, right?
Now, you had a good point
Yeah.
before. What did you notice?
I would just notice that my students who were 2s weren't annotating the text. They were reading it, but they weren't reading it with a purpose. And even the ones who did annotate, they weren't internalizing that they were doing it to compare and contrast the 2. So they would write things, but they weren't paying attention to how they were connected.
So they really weren't reading with a purpose. They were really maybe more reading the text in isolation. I found that sometimes our students would repeat the same detail. Either they would only write one detail that was similar, or they would repeat that detail just in phrasing it in 2 different ways. So I think that it was a challenge for them. A lot of our students, we found that they were able to find one similarity, but not 2. And so I think that maybe part of that was that the details were not worded exactly the same in the text. So for them to see that it doesn't have to be worded exactly the same
Right.
for it to be giving you the same information. So like there's that disconnect between saying, you know, like that detail about this text says an elephant breathes and smells through its trunk, and this text says it uses its trunk to breathe and smell. They're similar, but they're not
Right,
exactly,
they're not exactly the same.
So can they kind of...
That's kind of what I thought it was as well. It's kind of like that paraphrasing.
Right.
Like they're taking the ideas and connecting them. It can't be the exact same words, and they struggled with that.
Right.
It's just, is this idea similar to the other one in the text?
I saw something similar to what you're saying, but instead of just, like they gave 2 details, but it was just the detail, like one detail on how, for example, how they spray themselves with their trunks, and then they took out exactly that detail from one text and then took out the one that was similar from the other text. But it wasn't like 2 different types of similar details. Am I making sense? It was the exact same details from 2 texts.
Yeah. I think a lot of these students who fall into this category are looking for words that are exactly the same.
Yeah.
And they're just not, because it's 2 different texts. So it's more of that understanding. It's kind of like paraphrasing.
Again,
Right.
because I think to a certain extent, they don't understand that the point is to just pull out important points about a topic. So they're focusing on like the specific wording and the exact details, instead of saying like, oh, this tells me that they use it to breathe. This one says they use it to breathe.
Yep.
This is a bigger idea about how elephants use their
Absolutely.
trunks. So they're still not really differentiating between those details and the important points.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I like that part that you said about knowing the bigger idea. If you just want to jot that down, I thought that was important. That makes it a little clear. Okay, so what are some things that we can do to help these students? I was thinking possibly like a guided small group. If we sit with the students and we practice like the annotating and the underlining the key details, or even reading with the questions in mind.
Yep.
Doing some guided practice
Yeah,
would really
modeling
help.
those strategies. Absolutely.
So maybe like just some models of success,
Yeah.
like and
Yeah.
some chances for them to have mastery,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I really agree. I think that this is something that they need to just practice, that that strategy of understanding, like, oh, look, these 2 things are kind of similar, you know?
Yeah, and even modeling, referring, as you're reading the second text, referring back to the first one. Oh, I remember that we heard something similar in the other text. And as you're reading, doing those think alouds.
I wonder if we could even do some examples and non-examples with like, is this really a similarity because they're worded differently in text? Like just doing some group
Yeah.
work together, like, is this a similarity or is this not? Let's go back and check, let's
Yeah.
underline it, you know, rather than just doing it right from scratch.
And it shows them to go back and reread the text.
So
and
they
to
can actually be
underline.
doing all the strategies
Right.
they need to, but not doing all of the work. They kind of have like some choice.
Yeah. Because some of the things I noticed with some of these students, they are underlining things, but it seems to be like just irrelevant details
Yeah.
or irrelevant sentences that aren't connecting to
They're
the
going
main
through the
purpose.
motions, but they don't
Right,
understand
they don't know why.
So would it be helpful if they were to underline using colored pencils, where like we did in our model on a graphic organizer, we would
To show
model,
that the
yeah, to
ideas are
show
To show
similar,
that
like
they're similar.
so that they can really prove how they're both similar.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
isolate, oh, look, this is about breathing, this is about breathing. Okay, this is,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's not just underlining in one color and then not being able to distinguish which ones are similar.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the students who are novice. What do we think was a barrier that held them from being proficient or?
I mean, these
Excellent.
students are still having a hard time identifying the main topic of the text.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
really, they're able to say that that both texts were about elephants, but to be more specific, that they were both about elephant trunks, we're holding them back.
I think for us, we found it was more the identifying one detail that is different. We found a lot of the novice students could identify the main topic, but they couldn't pull out similarities and they couldn't pull out a
Yeah,
difference.
it's a tough one because the students are scattered all over a little bit in
Yeah,
this area.
absolutely. It's often the outliers.
Some can't determine
Yeah.
the main topic, which then they have difficulties with the details,
Yep.
and the details,
Yeah.
you know.
Do you want me to put both of those down?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that was one, both of my novices both did the same thing.
Absolutely.
yeah.
What did you find, Christine?
I didn't have any novices, but my outliers that were in developing that didn't fall into what two details are similar were
Okay.
the main topic. I brought them to a developing, yeah.
So why do we think this was challenging for them? Well, I think it's hard for them to determine like the key details because it's hard for them to read the text.
Mhm.
We gave them on grade level text and a lot of these students are reading below grade level. So it's hard for them to go back and to read on their own with a purpose or to determine a key detail if they can't understand all the words in the text.
I think too, some of my students, they could read it, but they're not internalizing the meaning of it. They're just surface reading.
Yeah.
They're decoding it, but they're not thinking about what they're actually learning. And without the prompting of reminding them to annotate and asking them those questions, they're not reading with a purpose.
Something we found during the actual bend and in small group, I think really ties into this group, is that they identify the main topic of the text. Like, for example, this student got that question correct. He was able to say that both texts are about elephants' trunks are helpful. But then they don't understand that when you pull out important points, they all have to connect back to that main topic. You can't just pull out those interesting details
Yeah.
or any little facts. It has to connect back to that. So I think they're not understanding like the way the standards connect and why and how identifying the main topic then helps you pull out the important points, which then helps you compare and contrast. They're missing that link.
Yeah. And I know we spoke about it in the developing category also, but they're not paraphrasing, they're just writing something they see
Right,
from the
they're not
text. They're not doing it in a
synthesizing.
methodical way.
Yeah, they might have just copied.
Okay, so what can we do to take these students to the next level?
I mean, thinking about the students who are working on the main topic, the exemplars and non-exemplars, I think,
Yeah.
still tie back to that, what is the main topic, and showing them the two choices, and especially since this is a multiple choice question, giving them the option of, and practicing the strategy of also crossing out the ones that don't make sense, or showing why one isn't right to help you figure out which one is correct.
I think examples and non-examples is perfect for addressing both of those barriers because you can have an important point and say, is this an important point? Is it related? And then you can start to think about the similarities and differences.
It's kind of like we can have them in a group and have like a mini debate with choice.
Right. That's
and
a great
let them
idea.
justify.
Which one is, absolutely.
I think the discussion will really force them to kind of defend their thinking a little bit and really go back to the
Right.
text, use the details.
And we can still be modeling, underlining, and things like that. As they're telling
they're
us, well,
telling
I
us.
remember in this part of the text, we can be underlining.
We can be
Letting
scribing.
them doing the deeper thinking, and we can just
Right,
underline.
and we're also helping any barriers of us finding it in the text for them and underlining it, because students who might have some trouble visually, like skimming through to find their points, we're doing that heavy lifting for them, so they just have to think about
But
it.
they're just picking up on it that, oh, that's what good readers do. They're annotating as they go.